Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Prevention and Practice Strategies for Campus Partners. This webinar is one of a series of free webinars during National Campus Safety Awareness Month. My name is Abigail Boyer, Assistant Executive Director of Programs for the Cleary Center for Security on Campus. Myself and our Program Manager, Amy Guthrie, will moderate today's webinar. She's going to start out by reviewing a few housekeeping items before we get started.
Thanks, Abby. Welcome, everyone. We are going to have a lot of room for questions and comments, so we encourage you to interact with us by typing those into the questions pane. We will be dedicating some time at the end of the webinar to address those for you. Also, there will be a poll with questions throughout the webinar. There will be several of those, and we hope that you will participate in those. So just a heads up on that. And we will also be recording the webinar today, so you'll receive a link to the recording within 48 hours. We're also making all of these available on the Cleary Center's YouTube page. And we encourage you as well to use the NACSAM 2014 hashtag and on Twitter and Facebook if you're sharing today's event. And let's see, what else did we have? And then also we're going to be following up with a survey, a link to a survey at the end of the webinar that we would like you to provide feedback on. And we very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Today we're thrilled to have the National Sexual Violence Resource Center join us to talk about how to develop comprehensive prevention strategies at colleges and universities. So the National Sexual Violence Resource Center's mission is to provide leadership in preventing and responding to sexual violence through collaboration, sharing, and creating resources and promoting research. With us is Laura Palumbo, Prevention Campaign Specialist, Donna Greco, Director of Training and Technical Assistance, and Annie Gebhardt, Training Specialist. Our panelists are Susan Eichenberger of Seton Hill University, Kelly Parsley of University of Montana, and the presentation will also include a program highlight on behalf of Jackie Deitch Stackhouse at Princeton University. So thank you so much for joining us today, and the floor is all yours.
Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. We're so excited to have you with us. This is Laura at the NSVRC. And I see that there's almost 200 of you that are participating now, and you know, rumors have it more will be joining us. And we're excited to be talking with you today about how campus partners can be working on a number of levels in many different roles to support campus sexual violence prevention. And we're hoping this presentation will be a helpful tool to you on your campus and in your sexual violence prevention journey, whether you're a longtime proponent of prevention or if you're new to the concepts that we're sharing today. And chances are, seeing that there's more than 200 of us that are having this conversation, there's going to be a number of different levels in the room that are being presented. And as our partners at the Cleary Center mentioned, today's presentation is also going to benefit from the insight and expertise of campus partners. As she mentioned, Kelly Parsley from Carroll College and Susan Eichenberg of Seton Hill are with us today, and they'll be sharing on a panel about prevention efforts on their campuses. And we'll also be highlighting a few efforts underway at Princeton. And the goal is to really have the opportunity to have some practical insight on prevention models and approaches from the panel. And I'll be sharing with you a little bit about NSVRC and our focus for today's presentation, which is on the principles of campus sexual violence prevention, and we'll be sharing best practices and prevention models. And we're hoping to keep the conversation interactive and engaging, so as our hosts have mentioned, you can use the chat function, and that is visible to us. And we're going to try and keep abreast of questions that are coming through the chat as we're able to respond throughout the presentation, but to be able to dedicate some time to that at the end of the presentation, there'll be a question and answer session. And a little bit of a disclaimer about the scope of today's presentation. We will actually not be focusing on compliance and legal requirements, as we're going to be talking about prevention models and best practices. So it's very fortunate that today's webinar hosts, the Cleary Center, are a really valuable resource on compliance and legal requirements, and so we definitely encourage you to reach out to them if that is one of your primary focuses and concerns. and to be able to access this information. And to get us started, we're going to have a quick poll. Oops. Ooh. All right, we're going to have a poll to see, to learn a little bit about who is in the room. And the poll is asking, what role do you play on campus? And so we had to limit this to 5 roles, and we know that this is not going to be fully representative of everyone who's here. But if you can select one of these categories, administration, campus safety / security, student affairs and services, or student, advocate, or prevention educator. And we're hoping, okay, it looks like our responses are starting to come in. We see that there are a lot of folks here who identify as advocate and prevention educators. And when we saw our registrant list, we were very excited to see great representation of coalitions, state coalitions, and rape crisis centers. And there's so many valuable connections between being able to connect your campus work to the resources that are in your state and communities. We're so excited to see advocates and preventionists on the line, as well as folks in student affairs, campus safety, and administration. And I'm having a little, we seem to be paused on our current slide. Okay, so thank you for bearing with us. And now we're going to just talk about a few key terms before we get into the substance of today's presentation, because again, we're recognizing that everyone's coming into the room with different levels of awareness on this issue. And we just kind of want to set the framework a little bit. So our presentation today will focus on prevention, which is different from response, awareness, and risk reduction, but all are very important pieces of a comprehensive approach to sexual violence. So when we talk about response, the goal is to lessen the impact of trauma, assist survivors and significant others, and intervene with people who sexually offend. Advocacy and counseling, arrest and prosecution, offender management, and restorative justice are all examples of response. Awareness has the goal of identifying risk factors and red flag behaviors, learning skills that could be used to escape or avoid. I'm sorry, that is risk reduction. Awareness is going to be looking at the lessening the, raising awareness about the prevalence and effects of sexual violence, helping survivors and the public know where to go for help, initiate relationship with the community or organizations. And so examples of this are fact sheets, one-time sessions on Sexual Violence 101, how to help a friend and where to get help, or definitions of legal definitions and consequences. Other examples could be an event like a clothesline project or Take Back the Night. And these can also play a role in healing, but the goal of awareness activities is really getting folks familiar with the issue. And this is a really valuable, important first step, but research does show us that these activities by themselves do not change norms and behaviors. And when we're looking at risk reduction, which I jumped ahead to before, but this is identifying the risk factors and red flag behaviors and learning skills that can be used to escape or avoid violence. Examples of this are watch your drink campaigns, self-defense classes or lessons along the lines of good touch, bad touch. And it's really important to note when we're talking about risk reduction that research suggests that although participation in some self-defense programs can decrease a woman's likelihood of being sexually assaulted in the future, risk reduction approaches place the responsibility on the victim for preventing violence. And by themselves, they do not prevent perpetration, and they do not engage the entire community. So they're not a community-level effort, and therefore they do not change behaviors among people who sexually offend or social norms and systems that contribute to sexual violence. And finally, where we'll be focusing today is on prevention, which is going to be goals that are focused on reducing perpetration, changing social norms that promote sexual violence, ending forms of oppression, increasing community responsibility for ending sexual violence, and we'll be talking about many examples of this throughout our webinar today. It's important to note that prevention is an ongoing process and a long-term process. You may be hearing us use the terminology that prevention is a journey, and it engages and empowers men and women as agents of change. It places the responsibility for prevention on the community. Okay, so it's not just looking at the individual interactions, behaviors, and it's addressing root causes and behaviors that are skill-based. So we're going to do another quick poll of the audience, and we're interested in hearing from you when it comes to sexual violence prevention. Where are you on your journey? So are you just beginning to learn, familiar with the basics, ready to train others? And if you can go ahead and select one of these categories. And we're now at nearly 250 folks on the call, so I'm sure this will be a spectrum of where folks are at their sexual violence prevention efforts. And hopefully, we'll be able to provide some tools for everyone who is identifying, no matter where they identify. So a lot of people are confident with the basics, and I think that that's a really common place to be. But there's also a good majority of you that are ready to train others, which is exciting as well, because as we'll be talking about in our presentation today, that is absolutely a step in prevention. But we do have some folks on the call that are just beginning to learn, and we're hoping that steps like grounding in the key facts and terminology and can help you as you're building a foundation in your skills talking about prevention. And now I'm going to be passing it over to my colleague Annie, who's going to be asking about hot dogs.
So another quick poll for you. Do you eat hot dogs for breakfast? Yes or no? Everyone can briefly weigh in on this question. Overwhelmingly, as a group, we do not eat hot dogs for breakfast. So a quick follow-up question. Would you eat sausage and biscuits for breakfast? Or sausage and a bagel, or toast, or a muffin, etc.? Overwhelmingly, yes. So we have a lot of folks who would eat sausage and biscuits for breakfast, but would not eat a hot dog for breakfast, which sort of then raises the question of what is really the functional difference between a hot dog on a bun and sausage with a biscuit or bagel or muffin or toast. There's actually very little difference when we think about it, and yet most of us would never think of listing hot dogs as a breakfast food. So we can then step back and think about how did we learn? How do we know that hot dogs are not appropriate for breakfast? Why is it that so many of us would not eat a hot dog for breakfast but would eat sausage and biscuits for breakfast? Where did we learn it? We might imagine our parents didn't feed us hot dogs for breakfast when we were growing up. When we eat out at restaurants, there are not hot dogs on breakfast menus. When we eat at places that provide food. Also, school cafeterias probably
didn't serve hot dogs as a breakfast meal. When we look at advertising for hot dogs, usually people are outside, they're barbecuing, they're at a baseball game. It's generally not 8 o'clock in the morning when we see people eating hot dogs. Even the hot dog advertisers are not trying to sell us hot dogs for breakfast. So ingrained is this idea that hot dogs are not a breakfast food. So even things as basic as food categories are learned and shaped by all of these various sources in our culture and society, through messages from people that we know, from the media, from what we're taught in school, from policy, until they become a really ingrained part of our own worldview and our behaviors. And just as our ideas and behaviors around food are shaped by environment, so are our ideas and behaviors related to violence. We're exposed to various social norms and expectations about gender, and about sex, and about relationships, and about power and violence throughout our lives from all of these different sources. And by the time they enter college, students have internalized a lot of messages that are related to sexual violence, some of which may support or condone sexual violence on some level. The good news is, though, that since violence is learned, it can be unlearned. So how do we go about that unlearning? Well, historically, our efforts have largely focused on educating individuals, either one person or one classroom at a time. On campuses, this often takes the form of online courses or brochures and flyers, presentations during first-year orientation, self-defense classes, and so on. But as the Institute of Medicine reminds us with this well-known quote, it is unreasonable to expect that people will change their behavior easily when so many forces in the social, cultural, and physical environment conspire against such change. So our efforts at creating change at this individual level can only take us so far. We need to zoom out a bit. And recognizing that individuals are heavily influenced by the people with whom they interact, many campuses and other communities have started trying to prevent sexual violence at the relationship level, focusing on encouraging people to engage with friends and peers, partners, and others to confront and change social norms that contribute to violence. And a lot of this, particularly on campuses, has taken the form of bystander intervention training, giving students knowledge and skills to speak up when they see something that concerns them or that reinforces harmful messaging, and also to promote healthy, respectful norms and behaviors. But this role isn't limited to peers. We can also think about the role of coaches and professors and even parents and many others in students' lives who can help to challenge problematic messages and promote respect. But we have to zoom out again and see that all of these relationships are in turn influenced by the larger community that they're part of. So when we look specifically at campus communities, it can be helpful to think about ways that every corner of the community can play a role in promoting prevention messages, so that students and all members of the campus community are getting consistent messaging throughout the community, and those healthy, respectful norms are being promoted wherever an individual turns in that community. So we're going to take a look at a few within the campus community, and we can think about and perhaps share, we can talk as we go about ways that some of these different offices and departments on your campus are engaging in prevention. So starting with administration, often administrators have a very high-profile role when it comes to response to sexual violence in campus communities, and it can be helpful to think, too, about their role in, at the same time, really putting forward prevention messaging. On many campuses, residential life and services plays a role in prevention through first-year orientation activities. Health educators may also play a role in supporting prevention-related workshops and social marketing campaigns on campus throughout the year, throughout someone's time on campus. Campus safety, of course, plays a really big role in response and often in awareness and risk reduction as well. But for some, prevention, as we're defining it, may be a newer role for them in some cases. There are also opportunities to think about new roles and partnerships for folks in information technology, the Career Center, service learning programs, and so on, again, so that the entire community is on board with a consistent message around prevention, or many consistent messages around prevention, safety, respect, healthy norms, and all of that. Increasingly, athletic programs are playing a big role in prevention on many campuses. We can think about the role of various student organizations, multicultural and multi-faith centers, Office of Greek Life, and the Women's Center historically has tended to be very involved. And we can also think about opportunities to engage academics as well, and to engage faculty around prevention messaging, both through the classroom, through the roles as maybe faculty advisors to student organizations, through the roles as academic advisors to students, various ways that faculty can play a role. And then it also can be helpful to think about the role of local restaurants, bars, businesses, and so on. Although these are generally beyond the perimeter of the campus, they can be very much a part of the campus community and campus life for many colleges and universities. So it can be helpful to think about what kinds of messages related to sexual violence and its prevention might students encounter when they socialize off campus, and what are maybe some campus community partnerships that could help, again, to reinforce that consistent message, and what kinds of learning opportunities are available to students who live off campus as well. And then we zoom out once again to see the way that the campus community is then in turn situated within the larger society. And we can think about all of the norms beyond our sort of campus community walls that students bring with them to campus and that they are still exposed to while they're on campus. And then also the role that colleges and universities throughout the country can play in helping to shape the conversation on a societal level around sexual violence and its prevention. So back to the hot dogs for a moment. If we asked you to start eating hot dogs for breakfast tomorrow, would you do it? Quick poll. Would you say definitely not, probably not, maybe, or absolutely? You're going to go out and buy a new pack of hot dogs and buns on your way home this evening. Okay, so a few absolutely ready to go, ready to have hot dogs for breakfast. It's possible that some of you were the folks who already said you eat or would eat hot dogs for breakfast. But for the most part, it seems like, we're either not going to do it or we're not quite sold. So even after I've demonstrated earlier, I think that our ideas about hot dogs for breakfast are really socially constructed, and there are no tangible reasons to not eat hot dogs for breakfast if you would eat sausage and biscuits for breakfast. Most of us still don't want to do it. You've spent decades not eating hot dogs for breakfast and learning from a variety of sources that hot dogs are not a breakfast food. And in general, people in the US tend to have pretty strong norms about hot dogs for breakfast, even though you may have never consciously realized that you had these feelings about hot dogs until today. And here I am, just one person on just one webinar, after decades of you not eating hot dogs for breakfast, suggesting that maybe you should go ahead and give it a try. So for that idea to take root and change your breakfast eating habits, you probably need more than just my say-so, just this one time. So if we want to change people's minds, we're going to need to find ways to send a new message at multiple levels, and we'll probably have to go beyond just kind of classic traditional education around hot dogs for breakfast. We might need a hot dogs for breakfast movement with social marketing, hot dogs not just for breakfast anymore, friends make friends hot dogs for breakfast. We need to get our school cafeterias to start serving hot dogs for breakfast. All of the same places where people learn that hot dogs are not breakfast food, they need to be getting messaging that hot dogs can be breakfast food and maybe even should be breakfast food. And similarly, when we think about sexual violence prevention, it can be unrealistic to think that people have heard some negative messaging throughout their entire lives, again, around gender and sex and relationships and power and violence and all of those things, and that it is going to be simple to unpack and learn those things and replace those negative messages with messages around respect and healthy sexuality and healthy relationships and safety and all of those things. So whether we're talking about hot dogs for breakfast or talking about changing social norms around sexual violence, there are 9 principles of effective prevention that can be really helpful in these efforts. So first is that our strategies are comprehensive. Again, we're approaching the issue in multiple different ways and multiple different settings to address a wide range of influences on the issue. People also need to get sufficient dose of our new message, of our positive message, whether it's, again, social norms or hot dogs for breakfast. People need to hear it time and again in order for it to have an effect. And it would be helpful if they maybe hear it and then hear it again 3 months from now or 6 months from now, or hear it, every other week or so to really reinforce the message that we want to send. Appropriately timed. It's really important that our efforts are reaching people at the moment where it will have the greatest effect. So if I want to influence your breakfast selection, it would probably be a good idea for me to have some ads on in the morning when you're maybe eating breakfast, or to have ads in the store when you are making your food buying decisions. Similarly, when reaching students, it's important to reach students around sexual violence prevention messaging when it can have the greatest effect. Often we see that when they first come to campus, but it's also important to think about it throughout their college career. The message needs to come from skilled trainers and someone with sort of recognized expertise on the issue. And again, varied teaching methods, so folks are hearing the same message or messages multiple ways from multiple voices over time. And it needs to be socioculturally relevant. If I am hoping to change your deeply rooted ideas about relationships and sex and power and violence and all of those very complex things, I need to make sure that I'm doing so in a way that speaks to and is respectful of and resonates with the culture and traditions and background where you learned those other messages. And preventive strategies should have some kind of logical rationale for why we're doing them. And it is helpful if they support positive relationships. And finally, we need to have some sort of evaluation component to make sure that what we're doing is effective and it is having the impact that we want it to have.
All right, and so thank you, Annie, for going over the principles of effective prevention, as well as making us think critically about our hot dog consumption, which as a vegetarian, I think that I opted out of, but I think that that's always a really fun example for exploring prevention, and hopefully that's something that maybe folks can actually utilize if you're training on prevention and sort of presenting it as a new framework for people. I think it's a really great tool. So the principles of prevention guide us in how to make our prevention efforts most effective, but there are actually a lot of different approaches to prevention or topics where you can apply these principles, and that's what you see on the screen here, and we're calling those approaches to prevention. And these are not, by no means, not all-encompassing, but these are a few key ones that we think we're seeing a lot of in a lot of use on campuses. So bystander intervention, which is educating community members to identify specific roles they can take to prevent sexual violence. And this is individual skill building, and it discourages victim blaming and promotes changing social norms, a lot of multi-level community involvement in responding, and it's relevant to many forms of violence as well as other challenges in the community. So those are some of the benefits of bystander intervention as an approach that might be relevant to your campus and your campus's needs. And that's, of course, in choosing an approach, a really key prevention principle to apply is knowing sort of the needs and what would be relevant. Healthy sexuality is a prevention approach that I think has a lot of great potential for campus audiences, just knowing the age group that is coming together on campus, and the fact that very many college students are still lacking a lot of comprehensive sexuality education and have a lot of misinformation. So when we're talking about healthy sexuality as a sexual violence prevention approach, we're talking about promoting positive skills and behaviors, defining consent in a sex-positive and enthusiastic way, and challenging gender norms. There's also the approach of media literacy, which is acknowledging the role of media in shaping norms and behaviors. And this is then also a very proactive approach because it's also involving analyzing and criticizing messages in the media and creating healthy messages and content. And I think one great resource I always like to mention around media literacy is the Media Education Foundation and their films, which are widely used on campuses and oftentimes focusing on campus-specific audiences and environments. And then engaging men, which is another approach, and that's going to focus on promoting healthy masculinity and men's engagement and critical discussion of gender roles and violent norms, and really involving men as partners in the solution, and doing some really constructive work on and attitude change and behavior change. And anti-oppression work is sort of a larger umbrella, and that would be drawing connections between multiple forms of oppression culture, as well as noting how how intersections of oppression impact individuals, and this could be based on their gender, race, sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, citizenship status, class, a number of different factors, and it promotes equality and justice. And I think that one of the pieces of feedback that I've heard about campus efforts is that there are sometimes barriers around inclusiveness in members of campus audiences that do not feel as though they are represented and being addressed in the programs or the activities that are happening on campus. So how can we be inclusive of students from all backgrounds and identities, as well as how can we actively, as a community, be engaging in social justice work. And we also, since we realize these are not, this list is not all-encompassing, we would like for you to share if there are other approaches that you think are really relevant and great, and if you could type them into the chat. Okay, and as folks are sharing, there was someone who commented a question that came through about what was the media resource called, and that is the Media Education Foundation, MEF, and they create films with study guides focusing on media literacy. And just as a plug, because some of you may know that I am the coordinator for the Sexual Assault Awareness Month campaign, they do generally offer a discount on all of their films during Sexual Assault Awareness Month, which is April. Great, and I'm wondering if our organizers can let us know if any responses came in through the chat. All right. Hopefully folks are able to share some of their approaches. Our dashboard just changed, so maybe we'll Okay, here we go. We have interactive activities. Someone mentions walk a mile in their shoes. And then engaging parents to teach children not to rape. So this is, that example would be prevention focused at earlier ages. So because you realize that, as Amy was mentioning, that people have been, by the time a student comes to campus, they've had 18 plus years of education and experiences. So how, in addition to campus efforts, how are we looking at efforts at every age level to promote prevention? All right, so thank you for sharing those approaches and participating in that. And we'll be talking a little bit about the spectrum of prevention now. I'll pass it to Donna.
Thank you. So Amy walked us through the various roles that we can potentially play on campus to prevent and respond to sexual violence. And also Laura and Annie talked about just the importance of prevention messages coming in different forms at different levels, and that these messages are really reinforcing concepts that will help to affect positive social norms that prevent sexual violence on campus communities. So we like our tools and we like our models and strategies that really help us think critically about what this looks like in action. So some of you may be very familiar with the Spectrum of Prevention, which was created by Dr. Larry Cohen of the Prevention Institute. And this is a model that really helps us in developing multi-level strategies to prevent sexual violence and other public health issues. So it's really a strategic planning tool that helps us sort of think about what does prevention look like at different levels of our community, at the individual level, in sort of campus-wide community education and campaigning. What does it look like when we're engaging multidisciplinary providers on a college campus in their roles in preventing sexual violence? What does it look like in our collaborations and our coalition building, both within the campus but also in the larger community? It also helps us look at our policies and our procedures and practices at the campus level. What is in our policy around prevention and response, and what do students and the campus community know about that policy? It also helps us in influencing larger public policy and legislation issues that inform sexual violence prevention and response. So we start with this tool to introduce our wonderful panelists because they are doing this work in action. So we want to turn it over to Kelly Parsley from Carroll College in Montana, and she will talk with us about the strategies that they're using along the spectrum to really address sexual violence and to prevent it in Montana.
Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Parsley, and I do want to clarify something, or I hope you can hear me. There I am. I am a professor at Carroll College, but I wear a couple hats here in Montana. I help the state of Montana manage all RPE funds. RPE is Rape Prevention Education Funds, and we may actually be the only state in the nation that has funneled all of our RPE funds into our colleges. So I wear two hats and work at several colleges here in Montana. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Now, you might recognize this Time Magazine article. It came out in May of this year, and you probably saw the lead story and said, yes, it's time that people pay attention to the fact that there is a rape crisis in higher education. You probably read the article and said, thank goodness somebody's paying attention to this issue. People in Montana, however, opened the article up and they saw that picture, which is the administration building at the University of Montana. And the lead sentence in this article is, the college town of Missoula, Montana, saw at least 80 reported rapes over 3 years, earning it the name America's Rape Capital. So if you live and work in Montana and you see that, that means all summer long you're responding to this very issue that we're talking about today. Just a real quick background on what happened at University of Montana. In 2011, there were many charges of rape on campus. Some of those were investigated, some were not. Some were dismissed. One was tried and he was acquitted. One was 2 cases. The male fled the state, so they were not able to interview him. One case, a man pleaded guilty and he went to jail for 10 years. So lots was happening at the University of Montana, and for whatever reason, the Department of Education and Department of Justice decided that this is a campus we need to look at, we need to do an investigation. They did. They were here for quite some time, and they wrote a very long report about all of the ways that not just the university was doing things wrong, but the town itself. And if you want to see more of that, you can go to notalone.gov, and there's a full report on how Department of Education investigated University of Montana. So we've been responding to this article ever since it came out. Could I have the next slide, please? What we discovered, however, it's not the first sentence of the article that's really important to us. About 2 paragraphs into the article, there is this. Calling Missoula the rape capital is as misleading as it is ugly. The University of Montana isn't a bizarre sexual assault outlier in higher education. Instead, it is fairly average. And I think this is the kicker. My school is your school. If you have a college campus that, that responds the way the universities and colleges in Montana or in the United States have responded to this issue for decades, then your school is my school. This is average. This is normal. And it's sick, it's wrong. We have an epidemic on college campuses, but the important piece here is that we're really not that different from everybody else in the country. However, when the feds come down and they investigate you, you have to respond in ways other campuses don't. And the University of Montana has done some fabulous things, and we're trying to implement those things at the other campuses here in Montana. Oh, this is the slide. 4 things. Oops. There we go. Thank you. Take it seriously, complete a needs and resource assessment, develop education, and use a campus climate survey. I have 1 slide per each item here, so I'm going to talk through them quickly. Next slide, please. Here we go. The first item is take it seriously and put resources into it. We all know that this is the issue today, but tomorrow the issue could be, I don't know, head injuries and football helmets. So we need to really strike while the iron is hot. And we really need to try to get as close to cabinet level as we can on university campuses. If you have a president of a university, she meets with cabinet members once a week or once every couple weeks. And getting your voice at that table is really important. I find rarely does the victim advocate get to be at that table or the prevention specialist, but your Title IX coordinator may be at that table, or your risk management specialist may be at that table. And that's the mouthpiece we need to have so that those people making decisions about our campus, money decisions, policy decisions, get to have our information as they make those decisions. So that's 1. Create adequate and sustained institutional support. Now, I think those of us in our field have done ourselves a great disservice. We have begged and pleaded for any kind of support. They'll give us 2 or 3 hours a week in an office behind the boiler, and we've said fine. And what has happened is we've really trivialized our work. We've set ourselves aside from the rest of campus, and we were willing to take whatever, scraps they were willing to throw from the table, and we need to stop that. We need to allow campuses to step up and support this work and support prevention with their funds, with their budgets. The football coach never worries about where his money's coming from next year. The president never worries if she'll have a job next year. Your rape crisis advocate or your prevention specialist, they always worry. And what we need to do is have that university or college build this information into their budget so that you get institutional support, and hire a campus coordinator. Now, as the RPE manager for the state of Montana, I have funds to support the work that they're doing, but I've worked really hard to hold back and allow those schools to claim responsibility for the problem and the solution, and then use my funds to help them as they move towards a solution. Next slide. Oh, next slide, please. Complete a needs and resource assessment. Now, your victim advocate would say that there's a certain level of crime on your campus. Your bookkeeper probably would say there's a different level of crime on campus. What you need to do, or what we need to do, is create this campus-wide assessment so we can find out what is really true about your school, not the neighboring school, and not what I'm guessing. So a needs and resource assessment would include interviews, focus groups. You would include everyone in that community, students, faculty, and staff, and the community that lives around the campus. You might do environmental scans to find out where there are safer and less safe places on your campus. And you're not left to your own devices. You can go to notalone.gov. There are at least 2 resources there to help you do a needs and resource assessment for yourself. I would also encourage people to review and revise, and in some cases create campus policies. You can go straight to Title IX and Clery Act and all of those things, or you could go to notalone.gov, and they have a fabulous checklist for campus sexual misconduct policies. It's about 4 or 5 pages long, and you can just compare your policy with what the federal standards are. Or you can go to the Clery Center's VAWA amendments checklist and make sure that your policy is meeting the new VAWA amendment requirements. So there are some really fabulous tools out there for us already. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Number 3, develop education for all on campus. This is tricky. If you work on a college campus, you know students have incredible energy around this topic. They want to move some things forward, and it's hurricane-like energy in that it's going in a lot of different directions. You also know that administrators on your campus have silver bullet-like energy. They want to pinpoint one way, one strategy really fast and get it over with. And your job as somebody who understands prevention and the comprehensive nature of prevention, I love the 9 prevention strategies that Annie talked about earlier. You're the person who has to say, I love all this energy. Let's try to get it focused in a comprehensive way, a way that's trauma-informed, and a way that engages the community and allows the community to own the problem and the solution. So I would pay attention to, what audience do we want to reach? If oftentimes students want to reach the student audience, but they ignore faculty and staff. Oftentimes administrators just want to reach first-year students, so in the first couple weeks on campus. Determine messaging. It could be prevention messages, awareness messages, victim service messages, policy messages. Your students are very focused on awareness. Your administrators are probably very focused on policy. And as we learned today, really, if you want to make change on your campus, you have to back up and look at that prevention element and say that's the overarching piece that we want to move forward. It might have awareness elements, it might have victim service elements, but really prevention is comprehensive. So looking at that audience, looking at that topic you want to deal with, and looking at the methods and frequency of how you want to do that. So the University of Montana created a one-time online 1-hour tool for incoming students called PETSA. Other agencies, you can go out there and purchase these. Back in January, I watched about 8 of them, and they're all adequate and inadequate in some ways, so spend some time with them. Your better bet, one of the 9 principles of primary prevention, is to make sure that it's comprehensive and there's multiple opportunities to reach your audience. Many of the bystander trainings out there do that kind of thing, and you can find more information about that actually at notalone.gov, but some of the better stuff that I have been able to find has been at the NSVRC website as well. And then the last slide for me, please. Thank you. Okay, there it is. Create a campus climate survey to set baseline and measure progress. You want to do this right. If 3 years from now, when you realize your campus is so much better because you've done so much work and you need more funding, you're going to say that to somebody, and somebody's going to say, prove it. And you will not have a campus climate survey from 2014 to say, this was our baseline, and look how far we've come. So many people miss this step, and because you miss this step, you miss future funding, you miss future support from your campus. You say X, Y, or Z has worked so well, but you have no proof that it has worked so well. So we need to do this right. We need to spend time on it, and we need to hire professionals to create those instruments, better yet, find those instruments, and to find them, you can go to notalone.gov, gather the data, and analyze the data. And you need to have a good conversation with your colleagues about what you want to gather. Do you want to know more about whether your students are stepping up to be bystanders, active bystanders? Or do you want to know more about perpetration? Or do you want to know about how comfortable victims feel coming forward and talking about the horrible thing that has happened to them? All of those things would require a different kind of campus climate survey. So we want to spend some time thinking about what you want to gather and what you're planning on measuring down the road, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years from now. I would spend a little time thinking about the logistics. Senator McCaskill just introduced a bill that said that she wants to require campus climate surveys as a mandatory element for all higher education institutions. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but then when that mandatory piece comes down to a student audience, do you really want to mandate that for all your students? Do you want to, I would love to see all my students respond to a survey, but then it would break my heart to think that a victim would have to fill out a survey about the worst thing that ever happened to her before she was allowed to register for her spring classes. So I want to become very informed about what mandatory is going to mean, and are we going to have one mandatory form or many? Will this be an annual thing? Will this be every 3 years? Will I implement it in September when students are first on campus, December when they're leaving for fall break, or March when they're off to spring break? I want to pay attention to the weird idiosyncrasies that happen with a college calendar and college populations as opposed to what I might be experiencing in my other life. So that's my slides. Thank you for allowing me to chat through all of that.
Good afternoon. This is Susan Eichenberger.
Welcome, Susan. You can feel free to take the floor.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you to Laura Palumbo and the National Sexual Violence Research Center, as well as everybody at the Cleary Center, for giving me the opportunity to share what we're doing on Seton Hill's campus with the Blackburn Center Against Sexual and Domestic Violence. And I also thank you, Kelly, for the good information. I was furiously taking notes as you were talking, and I really appreciate you talking about the complexity of the issue on trying to make college campuses safer. We started doing this work in 2009. We've formed a group called the STAR team, that actually a group of students in a marketing class and communications class came up with our acronym. It's Social Transformation Through Awareness and Resolve. And on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about what we're about. So again, it's a collaboration between Seton Hill University and the Blackburn Center. And the main goal of the project was not only to raise awareness about sexual violence, but to transform attitudes and beliefs of students who then take these ideas into the larger culture. I love the hot dog example because it's such a great example of the power of socialization. And what we're hoping to do is socialize our students differently around gender violence and gender norms, and then they'll take that out into the culture and be change agents for us. So in the next slide, I want to talk about the overview, a little bit more about what we're about. So we first imagined the commitment between Seton Hill and Blackburn as a long-term commitment in which we would engage students at various levels. We originally had said between 5 and 10 years. 5 years in, we know that 10 years will be lucky. We know it'll be much longer than that. So what we're doing is developing and evaluating prevention strategies, as well as engaging students through campus activities. So larger campus activities that involve the entire campus, these programs come out of student life, the wellness center, campus ministry, as well as activities in classes that can be very small, 15 to 20-minute activities throughout a semester or an entire class focused on these issues. And through the various projects and activities, we're also testing the effectiveness of Blackburn's messaging, especially with this age group. So in the next slide, I'm going to share some of the specific goals for Blackburn. So there's some overlap, so I'm just going to talk about the one that's a little bit different. Blackburn's goal was to secure support for the completion of the major projects, and they have done that. We have grants that cover a multitude of things that I'll talk about a little bit later. The goals for the project for Seton Hill, through this university-wide programming, class projects, and service learning, students learn about the operation of a human services and nonprofit organization. They learn about marketing, communications, as well as all of the things about gender norms and that we talked about, our overall goals. But again, most importantly, perhaps, is to take this new sensitivity to gender violence and gender norms into the workplace and the world at large. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk real briefly about who the key players are on our campus with this collaboration with the Blackburn Center. So we began in 2009 with 11 members. We've learned a lot in the last 5 years about all of the challenges of coordinating this collaboration across the two organizations. So it became necessary to add some people to the team. Since then, we've built the team to 15 members. We've added a coordinator for the entire project, that's me, that I oversee the collaboration. We also have an assessment coordinator. That's important to know that we're doing something to change these attitudes and beliefs. It's important to funders. It's important to the ultimate goal that we are changing attitudes. We also added a student intern. That's been very helpful. So on the next slide, I'm going to start talking about more of the specifics of what we're doing. So we have, I'm going to talk a little bit about some project examples, and there's two levels at which we do these programming. So campus programming, again, these come out of student life, the Wellness Center, campus ministry, and other larger organizations that do campus-wide programming. And then we also have course projects, again, that range from very small to larger, all semester, throughout the semester programming. So some of the examples of the campus programming are all of our incoming first-year students have to attend a sex education program called Sex Signals. That's out of student life. We, in collaboration with Blackburn Center, a lot of our students participated in Walk a Mile. Somebody mentioned Walk a Mile in her shoes. In addition to that, we have a calendar where various male faculty, staff, students, athletes pose on the different months in the red high heels, and we sell the calendar at various events to promote. They take a pledge to end domestic violence and sexual violence, so it's sold at various places throughout campus all year long. And I'm also going to talk later on some of the challenges at some of these events, some of the specific challenges. We had last year a program called Sex, Drugs, and Everything in Between that was out of the Wellness Center. We also participated in an equal pay rally. We were talking earlier about anti-oppression and intersections of gender and class, so this is one way that we address that intersection or start to introduce students to the idea that it isn't just about gender. We can't erase or tease out class and race and ethnicity. So that's some of the introduction that they get to how these issues are all intersected. We also have course projects. Again, there's dozens of projects going on, but I wanted to highlight just some of them. I didn't have time to tell you about all of them, but I have a list for anybody who might be interested in other things that we're doing on campus. So the course project's Photo Voice, which is a national project that a lot of different organizations are involved in. This Photo Voice project was focused on gender in the media and how people conceive of gender. We have a senior capstone in our liberal arts curriculum. It's called Senior Seminar, and the provost, Dr. Marianne Gowalik, and I, our theme for our senior capstone is gender violence. So students spend the entire semester learning about gender violence, and then they do a social service project or service learning project. We do a campus assessment. All first-year students, and then in their senior year, take a survey that was constructed with Dr. Sarah Livesey and Dr. Jim Paharic, where their social science research methods class and statistics classes came up with the survey, developed the survey, and learned about analysis of quantitative measures. And so all of our students take this survey. There's 40 items on the survey, and they cover 3 different areas: gender norms and sexual assault as well as domestic violence. So there's 3 sections to those 40 questions. And the next slide, I want to talk quickly about how we evaluate and assess these projects. So you might imagine that assessment has been very challenging. Not only the time that it takes to do the assessment, but how to wrap our heads around evaluating every little thing that happens on campus. We know that we're not unique all over the country. People are doing good work about around sexual violence and gender violence, but what the goal of our project is really to infuse the curriculum throughout the 4 years so that students are really learning about it in a much broader way. So trying to figure out how to assess that has been really challenging for us. So I mentioned the campus-wide first-year senior survey that has 3 parts to it: the gender norms and beliefs, domestic violence, and sexual assault. And then they take it again in their senior year. In their senior year, there's a list that they can identify what are the STAR activities that they have participated in over the 4 years. So we can compare the students who have had a lot of exposure with these STAR exercises to those that may not have had as many, right? But we hope that we reach everybody. And the good news is that the analysis of the comparative data from the first year to the senior year, this was the first, last year was the first year that the seniors took it, showed that on 30 out of 40 items measured, students who participated in STAR activities or projects scored significantly more favorable in their attitudes about these issues. So finally, the next slide. I wanted to talk about challenges. So a lot of challenges have been mentioned as we've gone along this afternoon in all the presentations. And my provost said, you really need to talk about the challenges. So I thought, oh, thank goodness I got permission so I can talk about why, some of the reasons that people don't talk about these issues is because it's, I don't want to say embarrassing, but it's to have your campus to clearly identify the issues of misogyny and issues about gender stereotyping and sexism isn't what we want to put on the front pages of Time magazine. So I appreciate the dilemma that administrators face with wanting to have really good things come out of their campuses. So I appreciate being able to talk about the challenges that we face. We've done some great work, and the complicated matter that we are faced with we went into it thinking that we were going to educate the students, and what we've realized over the last 5 years is not only did students need educated, but so did we. We had some ways in which we don't all agree on the right way to do this or the best way to show students how to transform the world around these issues. So, for example, the sex, drugs, and everything in between, that was definitely a risk reduction model used for that presentation. It was not focused on prevention, and it was focused on women not drinking. It was also a problematic pairing of drinking and sexual assault, and the message that a lot of students got was if you don't drink, sex or rape doesn't happen, and we all know that that's not true. So trying to figure out how to find the best kinds of programming so that we can avoid these kinds of victim blaming and the responsibility being just on the victims. So, and focusing more on prevention. The walk a mile in her shoes in the calendar, we noticed in the first couple of years when we'd go to the events or we'd see people buying the calendar that some of the men that were wearing the red high heels were uncomfortable and joking around and acting gay in quotation marks, and so we had to do some things differently to address this and to make sure that people understood that it wasn't to disparage or make fun of another group of people. So we are adding different kinds of different pieces to it. Engaging men, we have folks that are going. We went to see Jackson Katz, and in a couple of weeks Tony Porter is coming to a call to action to men, so it's geared mostly towards men, so we're encouraging students and faculty and staff and our athletes to get involved with the men's movement to try to end domestic and sexual violence. And bystander approach work has also been added. The campus readiness report from PCAR has been really important to us as we try to figure out how to build community and how to build consensus in our community around these issues. We had our STAR committee take the survey for the first time last year, and we're surprised to find out that not all of us really were on the same page about some of the gender issues, and so we realized that we have to have the faculty and staff take the survey as well to try to assess where we all are as a group on these issues. And then probably I should have first talked about faculty time pressures, because in comparison to these other more complicated issues about internalized misogyny and sexism and theoretical debates about what the best way is to do this work, there's faculty time pressures. We're asking faculty to volunteer to do this, so they're taking time out of their course preparation and their own research sometimes to develop an entire course or an activity that talks about these issues that we're addressing. So we've had to ask people to volunteer their time, so that's been an issue. So thank you again for the chance to talk to you about all of this, and I have lots more information. If anybody has any questions, I can also send information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Yes, thank you, Susan and Kelly, for all that you shared. And a number of questions came through, and you're going to be getting to those questions in just a minute. But right now, I'm going to take the opportunity to share a little bit with you all about some efforts happening at Princeton. And when we connected with Jackie Deitch Stackhouse at Princeton University, she was so excited about the fact that this conversation was happening as a part of NICSAM and on a national level, getting campus folks together to talk about prevention. But unfortunately, due to a scheduling conflict, she was not able to join us. So I had a chance to talk with Jackie and get some great information and updates about some of what they're doing at Princeton University as a part of trying to grow their efforts, their comprehensive campus sexual violence prevention efforts. So one of the things that I found very interesting about my conversation with Jackie was that she talked about how they've mapped out their prevention across the levels of the spectrum of prevention, and really seeing the spectrum of prevention as a tool for them in their planning and big picture state to see how they could be incorporating each level and addressing each level in a program, and really modifying their programming and planning to be effective across the spectrum. But she did mention that sometimes the spectrum can be a little bit less accessible to people who don't have a background in the prevention framework. So say that your planning partners who are at the table, trying to bridge that gap, they found the socio-ecological model probably not that not that language specifically, but the idea of individuals, relationship, community, and society to be a really great way to strategically plan their efforts and to have multidisciplinary and multi-level teams talking about these issues and looking at these issues. And they set the goal to be sure each level is addressed through their programs, and really we're able to do this by having significant buy-in at the institutional level. And I think I heard both of our panelists mentioning this in some aspect, that really that is the foundation for sustainable prevention efforts, is creating that buy-in and institutional support. So that ownership at the campus level, and it is something that's very, very key. And they found that in order to build some of that ownership, they really using the evaluation base of the programs that they were intending to implement was very helpful, as well as having a strategy and focus area to really be able to communicate their plan and their message well. And another important goal has been having culturally relevant and campus-specific efforts. So one of the efforts I'm going to be sharing with you about today is something that they're undergoing now, which is modifying a bystander program to be specific to their campus needs and goals. And again, in addition to tailoring efforts to the campus culture and needs, they've emphasize using evaluation and data to support best practices and reinforce buy-in. So the bystander intervention model that first got their attention as something that would be very effective on their campus was the You Matter model. And this is out of the University of Wisconsin, and it's a bystander intervention campaign, and it incorporates prevention efforts across offices as well as across topics. So drug and alcohol, health services, sexual assault, it's sort of looking as the bystander approach as something that's a comprehensive solution to a number of issues, and really focusing on the effective bystander skills and translating them and being able to translate those skills across a number of areas of focus. And so they found that You Matter was in accordance with the socio-ecological model, which was one of their goals, and that because they identified explicit risks and protective factors, it gave them very strategic areas to focus on. So again, in their decision-making process, they had to sort of evaluate whether or not generalized bystander training that could be implemented across a couple different areas of focus versus training on one topic happening in separate kind of pockets throughout campus, whether it be the drug and alcohol folks are having their bystander intervention training and all of that, what would be more effective and sustainable. And they really found that the integrated approach was something that worked well for them and their goals. And so the process they've been undergoing through the past year is being able to use the You Matter framework to create a specific bystander, a Princeton-specific bystander initiative, and that is currently in development. And they identified 3 problematic issues on their campus to be their focus area for when it is rolled out, and that could definitely be something that evolves over time, but they're going to be focusing on intimate partner violence, high-risk drinking, and distress or suicide. And again, the prevention strategy being bystander intervention, healthy choices, and pro-social activity as all effective approaches to all 3 of these issues, and sort of being a combined and relevant approach to them. And Jackie really wanted me to emphasize that although she was very excited to share about this effort, it's in development right now. So there's actually going to be more information when it is launched in September. And again, this is sort of my bird's eye view of it. I think that Jackie would be able to give you a more in-depth discussion about the campaign. And another campaign that I wanted to highlight of theirs is their Maverick project, which is Men Against Violence Resource and Intervention Community. And this is a project around engaging men as allies. It launched last fall, and it's an alliance of graduate and undergraduate students that are focused on preventing the occurrence of intimate partner violence and abuse within the campus community. And they do this by challenging social norms related to misogyny, sexism, stereotyping, and gender bias and orientation bias. And they really wanted to create a sustainable space for men to explore male identity through activism, education, mentoring, and fellowship. And one of the aspects of the program that she really highlighted was how in order for it to be sustainable programming, there needed to be, there needed to be not only this student investment, but this an institutional investment in seeing it through from year to year. And so they're focused on giving men the opportunity to talk about masculinity, including the toxic elements, and to challenge those ideas. And there's a goal around developing healthier relationships as well. And they created a PSA, which is online that you can get to through the Share Office's website. But you can also, they have a Facebook page for their program, and you can check that out. And to be able to find more information about these programs and connect with Share staff for more information, you can go to their website, which is on the screen right now. So we're going to take the opportunity to check in with some questions that came through as the panel was going. But there was actually another, we're going to, before we jump into questions, we're going to revisit our discussion of approaches to prevention, because all of you in the audience were sharing wonderful, wonderful ideas that were invisible to us because technology was being mysterious and complex, as it often is. So we just wanted to highlight a few of the prevention approaches that you all shared in your chat responses when the original slide was pulled up, because there was a number that didn't come through to our viewpoint, but we have access to see them now. So prevention approaches that the group shared included promoting youth leadership and having college students train younger students or younger peers, and I think that that's an excellent idea. And around youth engagement, last year's Sexual Assault Awareness Month campaign talked about that topic from the lens of healthy sexuality, so those are some great potential materials there. And another approach that came through was addressing and identifying rape culture, which isn't it this tremendous thing that rape culture is now in the public vocabulary, and it's something that students, it's a term that many students have heard and are familiar with, and it's sort of like that, moving media literacy to media advocacy and being able to bring that topic into their studies, but as well as their activism as students. Another prevention approach is effective communication and modeling healthy behaviors and consent. And again, I think that those are great pieces of a healthy sexuality framework and excellent topics to emphasize. Another approach was a family-driven approach, and they gave the example of breaking the cycle. And I'm guessing that they have some resources on a family-driven approach, and remembering that students come to your campus from their family of origin and their family background, and that not every campus environment is, there are commuter students that are still their home bases with their family. There are community colleges where, of course, people are, maybe still living at home, and sort of that vital role that families still play in the lives of as young adults, and oftentimes for many recent college grads as well. Another approach that came up was partner with fraternities to come up with educational presentations. That is a great idea. I think that a lot of the sort of special interest groups that we hear oftentimes about is programming for fraternities, sororities, and sports teams. There's a lot of really excellent bystander programs and approaches that have been specified to sports teams, and that's always really great. And something that was new to me, but that I learned about at the National Sexual Assault Conference, is a fraternity group called Consent So Frat. So that's like consent is so frat, but without the is, because I think it sounds hipper that way. And so Consent So Frat is a platform for sorority and fraternity students to be talking about healthy sexuality promotion. And then finally, someone mentioned alcohol and drug behavior, and then sort of using that as something that they connect their approaches to prevention, which is so necessary, but also so challenging, as one of the panelists mentioned. How do we talk about the issue of alcohol without being victim blaming, or without underemphasizing the fact that sexual assault can happen when alcohol is not involved either. So definitely an important topic as well. And now I think we're going to move into our section of questions that came through while the panel was going on.
Thank you so much, Laura. And just wanted to thank you again, Kelly and Susan and Jackie, for sharing what you're doing around campus prevention and response in your respective campus communities. You touched on so many important strategies around climate surveys and assessments, the role of administration, engaging students, making sure that there are educational opportunities throughout the college career on multiple levels. Also, you really highlighted the importance of collaboration among universities and local rape crisis centers and sexual violence prevention programs, knowing that those wonderful experts who've been doing this work for so long are in your community and in your neighborhood and ready to assist you in prevention and response is so important, knowing that you're not alone. And also looking at faculty's role in integrating sexual violence prevention in course curricula. So we did have some questions that came in. And the first one that we wanted to pose to you, Kelly, was if you had any tips or strategies in doing some budget advocacy with administration to get a peer advocacy or a peer education program going.
Wow, that's a great question. I think a big answer to our problems would be funding peer educators and well-training our peer educators. But every school I've ever worked with really struggles with, one, getting the funding, and two, maintaining a level of education that's adequate to sexual violence prevention. It's different than other kinds of prevention. So if you're talking about tobacco prevention, there's lots of resources to quit smoking. But when you're talking about sexual violence prevention, you have to be very careful to make sure everyone's trained on kind of myths. You know, sometimes we believe myths and we don't realize it, or we end up victim blaming and we don't realize it. So I'm not sure how to get more funding for peer educators, but I am sure that when we get the peer educators, we need to make sure that they are very well trained.
Thank you so much. Another question that came in for really any of our panelists and presenters is there was discussion about hiring a professional to do the climate survey work. And one of the questions that came in was, what about engaging faculty that are doing research and may have those evaluation and assessment skills? What are your thoughts on sort of engaging your existing faculty in that climate survey or assessment process?
This is Kelly. That would be the absolute first place I would look, is somebody on your campus that's already invested in this community and invested in this topic. My experience with seasoned researchers and seasoned faculty is they're already well burdened by other contracts or grants that they've prepared. So really getting to be on their calendar now for work that needs to be done in a year or two is really important.
Right.
Yeah, Kelly, that's what has happened at Seton Hill. We have faculty that are on this assessment team that developed the survey and have analyzed it, but as you said, they have other research obligations and agendas that so this is voluntary for them, but having the funding and the grant has helped, because we could appoint a faculty course release for heading the assessment team, and then my course release as well for coordinating.
Thank you so much. Another question that came in is around whether your experiences and strategies have included both sexual violence that's happening on campus and off campus. And I think that's also related to a question that came in regarding sort of the commuter colleges and the two-year community colleges, and that really wanting to make sure we're including, you know, multiple forms of campus communities in the conversation. So if you had any thoughts on how to make sure you're including both the sexual violence that occurs on and off campus, and then how to really engage commuter and community colleges in this work.
One of the good things, this is Susan from Seton Hill, one of the good things about the approach that we're taking is that students get, because it's happening in different classes, like a marriage and family class, they might talk about what happens, violence in the home or violence off campus. So we are able to get a pretty broad brush about gender violence. In addition to that, we use things that are coming right from the media. So, you know, what's happening today with the video that came out of the NFL player Rice. And so using current things that are happening not just on our campus, but off campus is a way that we try to address both on-campus violence as well as off-campus.
And this is Kelly. You know, it's really a false dichotomy for us to say that this campus lives in a vacuum that's separate from the community that surrounds it. And you really can see that students understand that. I see that less with administration. They're very focused on the curb, like right to the edge of the land that we own. Mm-hmm. And what happens beyond that land is irrelevant. It doesn't exist. The Clery Act has asked us to pay attention to that skirt around our campus, and I think that's a wonderful tool to bring back to your administration that we don't exist in a bubble. And students are wonderful about seeing that as a permeable barrier. That's not just a curb. That is my community where I live, work, and play, and the campus is where I study. So they're more likely to bring the two together.
Thank you so much. We are running out of time. We received a lot of really thoughtful and critical conversation questions. We will be responding to those. We captured them, and we really appreciate just your engagement and your level of activity with this issue and with what the panelists had to share. We wanted to just leave you with wanting to continue the dialogue and really wanting to be available to you all. There are a lot of great online resources on this topic, some of which we really featured and talked about today. We'd also like to just sort of encourage you to bring this information back to your communities. This is being recorded and the materials will be made available to you. Think about what you can do in the next 7 days, the next 7 weeks, the next 7 months, who you can really talk to back in your community about preventing sexual violence on campuses and responding to survivors.
And now on the screen, this is Laura, you'll see that we have a little diploma for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And this is just to let you all know, newly announced this month, that the upcoming Sexual Assault Awareness Month campaign is going to be focused on campus sexual violence prevention. So all of you are a really important audience to us in the campaign efforts that we're working on now. Sexual Assault Awareness Month happens each April, and it's a really great opportunity to be promoting your prevention efforts, planning prevention programming, and then sort of facilitating a community dialogue about the issue of sexual assault. So resources will be available in January, and again, we'll be sharing updates between now and then, and we hope that you are able to participate in the same campaign.
And we do want to continue the dialogue. Please do contact us at the NSVRC. There are also wonderful TA providers throughout the country that we collaborate with and refer to who know so much about this issue and can also be of assistance to you. Please feel free to reach out to us through our resources at nsvrc.org or our toll-free number with your questions and your needs and also your successes. And thank you to the Clery Center and our panelists for collaborating with us on this webinar today.
And so for the 185 of you that are still out there, thank you so much for participating with us. And we hope that you have a very successful National Campus Safety Awareness Month.
And from the Cleary Center, we just want to say thank you to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center and for all of today's fantastic presenters and panelists and your patience when technology is not always our friend. So we certainly appreciate that as well. We also wanted to mention that as a reminder, in your chat panel, you'll see a link to an evaluation for today's webinar. So we'd really appreciate it if you take a few short minutes just to share your thoughts and your feedback. We'd love to know what kind of content you'd like to see more of as we plan additional webinars throughout the year. And then this webinar was just one of 7 webinars that the Cleary Center organized for National Campus Safety Awareness Month. We have many more coming up this month, some of which are really focused on this issue around prevention, and we'll address some of these questions that maybe we weren't able to get to today, including how to be inclusive when you're thinking about planning for your programs and how to apply it within your own community, because I think that's a really good point that every institution may differ in size and population, so we really want to consider our own unique campus culture as we take a look at that. So we have another one coming up just this Thursday called Connecting the Dots, Empowering Campuses to Create Change, which will talk about policy and how you apply some of these things in practice. And another prevention-related webinar is coming up that was just added on October 2nd that's called Beyond Orientation, Building a Prevention Calendar at Your College or University. Because we know that certainly these aren't efforts that are just limited to National Campus Safety Awareness Month. We want to make sure that we're continuing them throughout the year. So you can visit our website at www.clearycenter.org to register for those upcoming webinars and to sign up to receive weekly professional development emails during National Campus Safety Awareness Month. That will also include that checklist that Kelly referenced related to the Violence Against Women Act amendments to Cleary from the Cleary Center, as well as other resources, not just from our organization, but from other organizations and individuals who are working around these issues. You can find all of that information by visiting the Education tab on our homepage and clicking on NACSAM NC for daily campus safety information, and you can also use that hashtag NACSAM2014. This webinar was recorded, and that recording will be shared online and will be emailed to all of you within 48 hours. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us. I know that National Sexual Violence Resource Center included their information as well. The Cleary Center can be reached by emailing info, I-N-F-O, at clearycenter, clerycenter.org. So thank you again to everyone for joining us, and we hope you all have a really wonderful day.